Hi, I'm Rania. Welcome to E52. I'm your teacher, and today we're going to talk about the third conditional. My friend Jean invited some friends to stay at his house while he was out of town for the weekend. Let's see what happened.
I'm on my way home? Oh no, that's all I need. If she told me she was coming home earlier, I'd have had more time to do these dishes. This kitchen is a disaster. Oh, great. If I'd known what terrible guests they are, I never would have let them stay at my house. Be there in 10? I'm never gonna get this done in time. If I'd seen this mess before they left this morning, I'd have made them stay to help me clean it up.
Hello, I'm home.
Hey, Mom. What a great surprise. If I'd have known you were coming back so early, I would have picked you up from the airport. I've just been hanging out here, relaxing.
We use the third conditional to talk about impossible conditions. These conditions are impossible because they are in the past and cannot be changed. For example, I would have done the dishes if I had had time. You could have cleaned up if you had cared. In both of these examples, the person is stating something about the past that cannot be changed. In the first sentence, the person is stating that an action, doing the dishes, would have been done if the person had had more time. In the second, the person is telling someone else that they did not care in the past, and that is why an action, cleaning up, was not completed. Actions in the past cannot be changed, but when people wish to discuss different past outcomes, they use the third conditional. The main clause can contain could, would, or might. For example, if she'd told me she was coming home today, I might have cleaned up immediately. So you could have washed the dishes if you hadn't left early. I wouldn't have asked them to stay if I'd known how untidy they were. Remember that these modals, could, would, and might, have different meanings and cannot be used interchangeably. Sometimes the conditional or if clause is implied rather than spoken or written. For example, I would have started. I might have cleaned up immediately. In the first example, I would have started, the speaker is implying that if the other person had asked, he would have started. In the second, the speaker is implying that if he had known someone was coming home, he might have cleaned up immediately instead of leaving it until later. In both examples, the speaker and the listener have enough information so that the conditional clause can be dropped. This does not mean, however, that you should always drop the conditional clause, as it contains important information. As we have seen with the other conditional exercises, the conditional and the result clause can be switched. When this happens, there is no comma separating the two clauses. For example, I would have moved those papers if you had asked me. You could have cleaned up if you had cared. To make the sentence negative, we add not after the modal. For example, if I had slowed down, I wouldn't have made such a mess. The third conditional is constructed using if plus subject plus past perfect for the conditional or if clause, and then followed by would, could, might, plus have plus past participle. If I had known you were coming home, I might have cleaned up immediately. If you had asked me earlier, I would have started earlier. If I had slowed down, I wouldn't have made such a mess. If I had known you were going to be gone so long, I would have checked it. If we had taken the train, we could have been on time. If they had hurried, they wouldn't have been late. If you had practiced, you would have won the game. When we invert the main clause and the conditional clause, we drop the comma dividing the clauses. I might have cleaned up immediately if I had known you were coming home. I would have started earlier if you had asked me earlier. I wouldn't have made such a mess if I had slowed down. I would have checked it if I had known you were going to be gone so long. We could have been on time if we had taken the train. They wouldn't have been late if they had hurried. You would have won the game if you had practiced. As we can see here, the third conditional is used to discuss past events and how they could have been changed or altered if conditions had been different. We can use the third conditional to talk about our own life, other people's lives, or alternate outcomes of historical events. For example, if I had continued playing the saxophone, I might have joined a jazz band. If my sister hadn't broken her arm, she could have won the gymnastics competition. If the team hadn't lost in the last quarter, they might have won the World Cup. Now I'll give you some situations which happened to you in the past. After I say them, I'll give you a few seconds to respond. Then, I'll give you some answers. You broke your arm because you were climbing a very tall tree. You could have answered, if I hadn't climbed that tree, I wouldn't have broken my arm. I wouldn't have broken my arm if I hadn't climbed that tree. You failed your math test because you didn't study. You might have answered, I would have passed my math test if I had studied. If I had studied, I wouldn't have failed my math test. You won the lottery. You could have answered, I wouldn't have won the lottery if I hadn't bought a ticket. If I hadn't bought a lottery ticket, I couldn't have won. Now it's your turn, and remember, you wouldn't have come this far if you hadn't studied hard already.